wasn't an
we'll
accounted
eliminate your
for.
pledge. So the first order of business, let's talk about John's contract right at the beginning. That's the first one. You all have copies of his requests. You all have the results of the council's preliminary input and comments. So I would like to hear your comments before we move forward with it. Any questions, big concerns, any things we need to deal with? Peter?
Was only, the only thing that I can, just in more, not in objection or anything else, but just, some more explanation on the PTO stuff. So right now it's how long?
So right now there's 30 days of PTO, so 6 weeks of PTO, which covers any leave needed. So anything from vacation
Bereavement
to
or illness or
bereavement
Yes.
to illness. There's no sick leave provision. So I'm the only employee with just PTO.
Yeah.
It's outlined in the initial contract.
Right.
And so the request here was for 5 additional PTO days. In part, that is due to for instance, I can't carry. I think I'm allowed to carry 1 week, 5 days from year to year, but can't accumulate a balance like
Right.
predecessors or other employees
Yeah.
can, and then are compensated when they depart. So in my case, they expire each year. We had negotiated a couple of years ago in the contract that if I had 10 days available, I could cash those in for a contribution to compensation. So what I was sort of finding is the real wild card is if you're ill, which again, for the most part, unless you're really ill, I'm able to work.
Right.
You either work remote. It's the nature of this job, even on vacation, frankly.
Sure,
You're still
right.
answering
It's
emails.
the nature of any job of your category.
Yeah, so that I think, given especially with kids the age that I have now, we try to maintain. We want to make sure we can take those 2 or 3 family vacations each year. With PTO, if you were to get sick a couple of weeks during that year, you wouldn't have any time available to. And because I can't accrue, you can't kind of plan for that. So the
Right.
request was for 5 additional days because I kind of use them up, if you will, especially with the turn another 2 weeks. So I use up the time.
So it's like a safety net,
Yeah, it's really more of a safety net.
because since you can't accumulate it, if you don't use it all,
Right.
then
There's
you
no
lose it.
cost. That's why I kind of,
Yeah,
as you
right.
value it, there's no real
Yeah,
cost to
there
the
is.
town. The area where, like my predecessor or others or other employees who leave with large balances, which is what the council was trying to get away from,
Yeah.
that would be the only cost, but I can't be paid out for any of them, so
Right.
there's no risk there. Most likely, safety net's probably a good word, should, like the last couple of years, been fortunate to not be out ill, or break a leg or something.
Yeah,
had to be
right.
out for some time.
You can still
If that happened, that is the word. But,
No, I don't know, you might. There
Think of
might
the
be some
example. There's
issues
probably
that
an
would cause
example.
you to break a
That's
leg.
what
There you go. Then that would be, those 5 days or more would just
Yep.
expire as the year goes into the next. So that's really the
Yeah, I don't really have a big
I
issue
don't
with
have,
that.
and that was the only question that I had was.
Yeah, and
the rest
like I said, I
okay
didn't
with
have
everything
a
else.
problem with it. I just
Yep,
wanted to hear
Make sure
Sure.
we
Yeah,
were
that's
clear.
the
your
excellent.
thought, and it's pretty much what I thought was
Right.
your thought, is that,
Yeah.
it provides that ability
It's a
to,
common sense solution
yeah.
to a problem that
Right.
is standard in any business, I would think.
Yeah, I think the biggest language change in here, as you saw, and as the pension attorney had to add some language, the participation in a 401A instead of 457, which I think everybody kind of understands. It just has different legal caps as to how much you can contribute.
Yep.
And in order to avoid that cap, I'd like to be able to participate in the other one. It has no cost. We already have a 401A.
Because it's a self-contribution anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and in this case, the town's contribution to mine would go into the same
Right,
plan,
so
which is
yeah,
already happening.
but
it's
you
no
want to be able to
different.
give more of your own
You
money.
want to control
Correct.
the market.
That's the only
Right,
one.
that's
So
fine.
it's a lot of legalese that basically just allows that to happen. And then Jim Jaska has language that we'll have. We actually just updated the terms of the 401A plan. If you remember at a council meeting
Yep.
2 months ago, a month ago. We will probably have to do that again, a pro forma update just to
Just to
have the
make sure
language
everybody-
on
yep.
file correctly. So that'll be a separate action.
And I don't know, Peter, you had anything?
no, go ahead.
I just had a question about the car allowance. I assume that's for gas.
Yeah,
purposes.
so it's largely, it's intended to cover anything. Very, very common in a. I don't have a town vehicle,
Right.
And so I use my vehicle for any business in and around town, and outside of town if I have to go to a Hartford meeting or something in the Capitol or council, whatever. So I don't have separate mileage reimbursement or anything else. So yeah, the real driving factor behind that is cost of gas has clearly been up over when we first established this 4 years ago. And wear and tear on the
Wear and tear on
vehicle,
your car.
everything about
Right.
having a car taxes, everything that's lumped into that is the cost of owning.
Right.
Have we ever looked into like you filling up where the police cars and everyone? I mean, just I mean, in that way,
Yeah.
they could keep track of how many gallons it is. I mean, would it be cheaper? And I mean, because like
Yeah.
right now, gas. I mean, it's a 20+% increase, but
Right.
you know, gas is going up double. You know,
It has,
so
yeah.
I mean, I don't see it asking for a lot more because gas. But you know, if gas drops back down,
Right.
do we change that or?
We could certainly monitor it. I will say that would necessitate a town vehicle though, because we don't have private vehicles
Okay.
using the town gas pump. So it would need to be, again, that'd be a conversation, right? We're hoping to, and it's not unheard of. There are town managers out there that have municipal vehicles. But it does run into, I mean, I think this works nicely because I'm responsible for my own expenses. If I drive that same vehicle to Maine for our family vacation, I'm not driving a town vehicle.
Right.
So,
Right.
so it kind of makes sense that I'm responsible for all of the costs. But what we were trying to reflect was something, recognizing the fact that I do drive around. You may see me in and around, but I drive around. We don't want any
And simple
disincentive.
things like you have to go pick up a kid from school, you've got a town vehicle, how does that insurance impact having your own personal?
It's a little more
You know,
complicated.
it's a little complicated.
This is
You're
a much better
responsible.
way to
Yeah,
do
much
it.
better,
Yeah.
much better. Yeah. Anybody have any other concerns
No,
about
that's
that?
all.
You, go through them, Don, you've got a note, so.
Yeah, no, that's I had the same question about Peter about
Yeah,
that,
and that was mine.
and then it was the gas.
So are we comfortable at referring this as a resolution to the council?
I
And
am.
are we doing this at the next August
I think
20,
that's-
whatever it is? Or are we gonna put this to the meeting?
It
the
will
first
either be
meeting
August
in-
23rd or September.
Okay,
Or September 14th.
okay. So if that's where we are, then I need one of you to make a motion to do that.
I'll move the employment contract for the town manager to the full council.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So let's move on to the goals and objectives part of this process. And Sean, let's see what's on.
Lead off with
I
this.
hear him.
Yeah, so what you have in front of you and circulated yesterday is very much a draft. I took into account the items we've discussed both in recent meetings, also a goal setting session. I intentionally left those bullets there with the blanks so that we can add to this if there are other items that you have come with or that the full council would like to add or replace with any of the key objectives. Going back to the goal setting session, the 5 main areas identified and agreed to by the council were the areas of economic development, finance, public safety, public health, recreation, and education. I did, because there were a few items that we know we're continuing on that didn't really fit perfectly into those 5 categories. I felt, and again in consultation with both Noel and Arnett, that the town operations, customer service, communication category that we had in the prior version, as well as kind of a listing of major projects. This one we could talk about a little bit. As you'll see, they are intentionally, as the note says, duplicative of some of the items in the other categories. But there was some, again, could kind of go either way, but there was something nice about having a list of those core ones we've agreed to are the major project initiatives. But again, you could sort of, you could parse that a couple different ways. Now, and we could probably move some of those back under goal 6 if we didn't want any duplication. But goal 6 is just sort of that additional operational and customer service focus that came out during our conversation. It's always been an objective, but certainly came out during some of our discussions during the performance review. Items like the website and others that fit nicely there that don't really fit in the other 5 categories. And then I think, understandably, the education one is a little interesting because obviously it's one of the 5 core areas that council identified. I'm not directly responsible for education. However, we've discussed that with a hopeful successful referendum this November, recognizing my staff, town departments are going to be heavily involved in the school modernization effort. I think that's kind of why the council had identified it as a key area. But I also took that opportunity to add the bullet that we had before, which is really continue to look for opportunities to share services, as the town has a good history of doing with the Board of Ed. So with that, I've tried to work in those that were identified throughout the last few meetings. There are maybe a couple others that we need to add in here, or some that you'd like to take out, but at least it's a starting point.
I read through this, but right now I don't have my glasses, so somewhere between my house and here, I've made 4 stops, and I had them when I started. I don't have them now, so I'm not exactly sure where they are. But by and large, they're all things that I have seen before and that I feel comfortable with. One of the ones in your health and whatever, public health and safety thing that particularly concerns me is making sure that we have our Chespercott Health District adequately working with the town in a way that we're all clear about who's responsible for what. And I see that as the first one, so I assume that's part of that goal, but that's important to me. But all of the others are things that we, in my opinion, we've talked about before. One of the things the committee was hoping to be able to do, and maybe that comes under that major projects part or whatever, was to give you at least some time. If we're judging you at the end of this year on whether you've accomplished these goals and objectives, and something has come up in the middle of the
Right.
year that has taken you away from these, because I don't know, there was an earthquake or something, and you couldn't accomplish them, that was through no fault of your own. And
Right.
we have to be able to recognize the fact that if those goals and objectives are not achieved because of some other untoward incident,
Right.
we have to be fair about evaluating that. So do we put a little category that says I don't know, Peter and I were just noodling it before you all came and said, is there a catch-all that says miscellaneous? I mean, how do we account for that?
I don't know if we have to really put it if he can't accomplish because a catastrophic incident happened. I think that's almost, understood. I mean, just like COVID.
Like COVID.
Yeah, I mean, we understood.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all logical people on the
Right.
council, and most of us are. And I think we see that,
Right.
we have to cut some slack in certain areas if we know that his time was taken up in other areas. I'm not sure if that needs to be put into
But
his
whose
goals.
decision
So
is that,
here's-
though? I mean, is that, Sean all of a sudden thinks there's something else that's come across his desk that says, I don't think we need to bother with this. I think this is more important. And we as a council have directed him to focus on these, but he's changed his mind and said, oh, I think there's something else that's more important.
We're talking about catastrophic things.
They're not necessarily talking about.
But if it's not catastrophic, then he really has to stick to the goals, I would think. I mean.
Well, of course he does, unless there's some reason why he feels strongly that we might want to rethink these goals to accommodate that. Am I overthinking it?
No, it's my thought was that, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that affects the other goals.
That's right.
And if that's the case, then instead of saying, well, you have X number of goals. 7 to me is a little unwieldy. I'd like to say 5.
Yeah.
But then if it's something that's going to affect his ability to do the goals, then it should become a goal that he gets rated on.
Right.
His handling of
Correct.
Yes,
whatever
right.
it is.
It's almost
the-
adding a new
the-
goal.
Right.
If we
Yeah.
see,
Mid-year.
Yeah.
and I don't have a
Because
problem
then
with that.
you're looking at a review that says didn't meet because of
But he meant
because
this
of
one.
X,
Yeah,
Y,
this
Z.
one in
But
spades.
oh, by the
Yeah,
way,
right.
he focused on this, which was knocked out of the park.
Right.
So then it would have to, I would say, if there's a change in that and we need to add it, then it's the approval of the council that he'd have to come to the council and say, listen, here's what's going on with this. And I think, and then we'd have to vote on it, I would think.
If I could comment, I think you
That's
hit the nail on the head. That is sort of the elegance and the beauty of it is that it would force that conversation and make sure that, and we do this often in the office. We've had these conversations. Hey, where would this fit in? We need to make sure we've brought this back to the council and verify that they want us to proceed down this. Now, one thing I've noticed, and I can think of a few smaller examples. And remember, this list, as we've all said, is never going to be all inclusive of all the little things, and
Right,
no one's
right.
expecting. Part of the job is just responding to things that happen and doing
Sure.
them, getting it done. So to be clear, but sometimes early on, you don't know how big a project might become, right? And in fact, I just had this kind of thinking about this recently. I had a conversation with Councilor Jinks about a proposal that he has for some safe routes around town for bicycles and pedestrians and things that he'd like to have an initial kickoff meeting. And I think John Mylan's also interested in kind of talking more about it. So Chief Drive and I are going to have a kickoff meeting just to hear about what it is they're looking for. Now, what I'm listening for is that going to become a big project? I don't know yet whether it's dollars or staff time, how much is involved in that effort. But again, in fairness also to the full council, I need to make sure, and again, right now that's looks like probably a smaller project, but everyone should have an opportunity to have their projects worked on. And also we want to make sure that if it does evolve into a larger thing, that's a conversation for the full council and say, hey, just want to make sure, do all 9 want this included? Let's say that became a bigger project, does it get added to the list?
Yeah,
And
do
that's
we
the
eliminate one
need
of
for the
these,
list,
or
right.
do we find room for it in another place? And
Again,
that's basically
having a
why I brought
half-hour
that up.
meeting
Right.
to hear out the request or the idea, I shouldn't say request, the idea. Some of these sometimes go through committees, like public safety or recreation commission. They have an initiative they want to
Beautification or
bring
any one
forward.
of those, yeah,
Right. And some involve my time and some don't, frankly.
Mhm.
But part of what we're hoping, and I think what works well about this list of goals and objectives is just what Don said. You can constantly take anything new, measure it against the others, and think, is it going to take away from some of the things that I know that counts? Because I want to be doing the things the council wants me doing. That's my number
Right.
one goal.
Exactly.
And so
The council as a group, not
group,
individuals.
exactly,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
important. So that's where I think that we all agree to that. Those are the kind of rules of engagement, and we say, it gives me the ability to prioritize and say, listen, you know what, this is great. Let's have a conversation at our next meeting and see if it wants to get added on or not. Let's have a more fulsome discussion.
And to go to Peter's point about evaluating the performance of those things, then that becomes a job of the council to say, okay, we've okayed this project. We recognize it's taking a little bit away from here and here and here. So how do we, when it comes time to do the evaluation, include that in the evaluation process? So you're being fairly evaluated based on jobs that you had to do.
Yeah.
When you look at these, some of them seem to overlap in overall concept. I mean, you have to have good finance management to be a good economic development group. So can these be combined into less than 7 separate goals? Can we take some of those?
I think the major projects could probably be put into the area you already have, like
Right.
recreation is
Yeah.
the same one. There's a couple
Right.
major projects that would fall under recreation. I think you could take those and put them into
And yeah, so to that point,
Right.
they all are already in other categories, with the only exception of the council chambers lobby, upgrades, which isn't even,
which
really
could fall under town
major,
operations.
but that could move
That
to
could
town
go
operations.
town
And
operations.
And I think maybe for simplicity, that might make more sense. Part of, again, singling them out was just to sort of try to identify those. I mean, Bartlett South and school modernization are 2 major initiatives. And I know, unless told otherwise, that you guys want us spending our time and staff
Well,
time
we've made
supporting
such a
both those
commitment
efforts.
to
Right. So,
financially do it. We need to see.
but there's no reason it couldn't be separate. And again, I was kind of 2 minds whether to keep that sort of separate designation or just leave them where they are. And
It
I'm
was
fine with
also,
the
it was
back.
also requested at one of the earlier meetings, a list of the major objects.
Yeah, I think Tim asked for that.
Major
Right,
that
projects
was-
was
right,
requested
okay,
as
that's right.
well.
So I don't know if that's a goal or
It's just a list of
it's just a
major
list.
projects.
that's right.
that you're taking from there.
So there you go, you're down a goal already.
Yeah,
Right.
it could be an addendum of major projects. And then it speaks to what you said earlier, which is if something more major came up that needed response or again, if we follow the same process next year, in my own sort of self-assessment to kick off, I could say, listen, we made key progress on this and this, didn't get as far as I would have liked on this, but please keep in mind,
That we
this
added
happened in
this.
December.
Right,
or whatever.
exactly.
Hope
So
so.
that's why
Yeah.
I'd love to see like a miscellaneous or whatever,
Right.
whatever the name is. So the stuff that you talk about that you got distracted from these gets put into that goal so you can be reviewed on that and it will counteract some of the other stuff.
Could that even be an introduction instead of a separate category, Peter? Could there be an introduction to the goals that says these are the major goals and priorities, but the town manager has the responsibility to reprioritize due to major and unexpected catastrophic events with the agreement of the council?
Yeah.
Something like that would cover it.
Yeah. The
That
other
would cover it.
the other thing
Yeah.
I've always thought of now that
Now
we're
that we're
finally formalizing a process here that
Right.
says goals and objectives submitted, you know, the contract is done July 1st. I would love to see us January 2nd of every year have a personnel committee meeting with the town manager that
How
says,
are we doing?
here's a
We're
6
halfway
month,
through, yeah.
you know, where are we?
Yep.
You know, is there anything we need to adjust in this that says,
Yep.
you know, based on X, Y, and Z,
Yep.
you know, or everything's on target, let's, you know, let's keep it the way it is. So
I think
it
that's
is part of the
necessary,
formal
actually.
process, even though it's not charter and everything else.
Right.
I think personnel committee should do a mid-year, if only if it's a sit down, and then it goes to the full council if it needs
Yeah,
to.
right.
But the personnel committee should meet with the town manager.
Can
at
that
the-
be included when we
6 month
present and adopt that sentence appears in the resolution that this will
Yeah.
be at the annual goals and objectives with a review in mid-year,
with a,
January,
yeah, with a
Because
January
Just-
meeting to
to
assess.
assess. Because
And
I
it,
would agree
it's
with that.
just, it doesn't have to be anything formal, it's a
No.
conversation.
Yeah.
You know, we just call a meeting.
Well, and
and say,
remember, it's this document, and even at our last department head meeting with department heads, you know, we referenced this and department heads are looking forward to getting a copy of it because they want to make sure similarly
that
they're
they're-
working on.
That they're aligned
Right.
to
And
your
that helps you
alignment.
to
Yeah.
direct them for the next 6
Right.
months, just if we have any slight things and saying, wait a minute, can we pull back on this one and maybe
Yeah.
concentrate more on that one? That helps you to direct that job description. So it seems to me it's much more streamlined, it's much more logical, and it keeps us focused because we always, as long as I've been on the council, we've never done goals and objectives anywhere near close to the time that we were supposed to have.
No, we
And
just
it's
kind
always
of
picked up.
repeated them every year
Right,
for.
exactly. And
yeah.
sometimes it wasn't even in the time frame. If it was supposed to be March, it was June when we got to it because other things got in the way. And I don't think that's helpful to you as in your job to be able to do it well. And I don't think it's fair to the council to have to evaluate you when we haven't done our job. So that's where I sort of said.
And I had a couple things. I know one of them is, you know, to have more internal communication with your department. And I would like the council to almost get reports back when you have, like, I don't know how often, if you meet once a month or just so that we're kept up to speed if there's anything that's happening in these places where we don't get blindsided at the end and say, oh, whoa, we didn't know that was happening, or I think those are kind of important for us. And then, and I know you have improved the town's online permitting system. And you know, in talking with people, and I know this is more of a planning department thing, but since you oversee that area too, you know, I would like, you know, to see from a number of people around town who are building, the amount of red tape that is. And I know when I was on planning and zoning, we tried to get rid of some of it, but there's still a lot of minutia in there that I think can be improved, and I'm hoping that Mike will start working on some of that. But in talking to several different people who are developing properties, that's the biggest issue. They're being delayed from getting their things
Why
done.
is the delay happening? Is it because we're not
Permits,
Well, why is that though? Is it because we haven't been able to go inspect something or because the office work isn't being done?
vacations,
or-
signatures, waiting for, you know, summertime if people are building, you know, and people's on vacation. Sorry, we have to wait for them to come back from vacation to get a signature. Now, shouldn't somebody else be able to sign off on that so that we don't keep the people from holding off?
Yeah,
Or,
that's what I'm trying to do
or-
is identify why is it that it's being
I mean, I
slow?
was surprised to hear that the police department had to sign off on a building permit. I didn't realize that. But I said, So now, how many people are signing off on building permits now? And
Is some of that statute though?
Yeah.
Yeah, that-
Code.
Right.
Yeah, they
Oh,
have,
yeah.
as the
But, I
Legal
mean-
traffic authority, there's sightline.
But is there
Sightlines and,
signage.
and identification of the address.
right, and is there an easier way to get so that, okay, well, a week here, a week there, before you know it, they're delayed 4 or 5 weeks, and every
Well, the beauty of the system now is that it doesn't wait for each of those to. Some of those approvals are being worked on at the same time as other departments, right? There's a master building permit, for instance, in some examples, but fire can be doing their review and police is doing theirs and others. So, and I'd be curious for the examples of, especially recently. I know there was, when we were down some folks in building department,
Yeah.
that was a historical issue, but more recently, I mean, multiple people can sign off in the building department. They are very
Yeah.
responsive.
They've been pretty responsive.
Sometimes, I mean, again, every example is a little different, but
Yeah, I'll talk to
sometimes
you
they
later
are.
about that, but
Yeah.
I do have a specific one that I'll
Yeah,
talk to you
yeah,
about.
and I'm sure there are, but generally that's been improved. I think certainly when I started here, I think it was.
And I meet with Tom Lozier on a monthly basis
Yeah.
as well and pop in
I
once in a
think
while,
those,
but
if those should
issues we'll
be
deal with.
handled individually, just to keep track of them, but as we all know, sometimes the comments that are made from a perspective of being outside the loop are not always based on the facts that are happening, so you gotta listen to the complainer and the complainant, I mean,
Oh, no, I
and
realize
so,
that, yeah.
so before you get down on the building department, let's hear both sides. of the
No, I'm
story.
not getting down on development,
No, no.
but I know my time spent on planning and zoning, I know we had a number
Yes.
of people complaining about the amount of red tape, and I know we did get rid of some of
Yes,
it
right.
going forward. I think we could still streamline that a
Yeah.
little
Mike
bit.
has been working on that too, on the
Yeah, and I
forms.
figured a new
Right.
He's
person
been
coming in,
working on combining forms and simplifying forms and,
and we don't want to
he's
deter
also-
people from coming into town to build, projects if they say, oh, geez,
Right.
they take it forever,
Right. No, we definitely don't. And
Makes
and I would say both the building official and the town planner are both dedicated to providing
Moving things
No,
along.
I figured that. Yeah.
friendly, cooperative service that supports economic development and our homeowners, so
Peter, you
it's a good one.
look like you're deep in thought. Do you
No.
have any other comments?
No,
Or you're thinking about dinner?
just a clever ruse.
But I think if we can combine those separate major projects
Yep, I'll
into
move
those,
those
that
up,
would make me happier to see it
Yep.
that way. But I also would like to see a separate notification list that just sort of gets put out to the council that says these are the major projects within the goals and objectives, but these are the major projects that we're working on.
It would almost be like a cover letter, because it
Yeah.
wouldn't fall under a goal or objective, but a cover
Right.
letter saying, these are the.
This is a list,
yeah, I don't have a
of
problem.
what we're working on, because that gives you a general description of that. Anything else? Peter? So with those changes, are you amenable to presenting those to the council?
Sure.
Okay, then let's have a resolution in that, to that effect.
Make a motion to send the town manager's 2022-2023 goals and objectives to the town council for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? We're all in favor. So we're good. So is there anything else that our agenda is completed as it was presented? So then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?